I never imagined a single ordinary visit could shatter the very foundation of my life. That morning, I woke up with the simple intention of checking in on my mother. She had been feeling a little weak lately, and although she insisted she was fine, a daughter's heart never rests easy. After finishing some chores at home, I grabbed my purse, got into my car, and drove toward her house. It was a bright, warm day, the kind that usually lifted my spirits, but for some reason, my chest felt heavy, almost as though my instincts were whispering a warning I couldn't yet understand. As I pulled into the street where my mother lived, something caught my eye that made my heart jolt. Parked neatly at her gate was a car I knew all too well, my husband's. At first, I smiled faintly, thinking he might have surprised me by visiting her before I did. Maybe he had finally decided to bond with her more, after years of keeping a polite but distant relationship. But that smile faded quickly when I remembered he had told me that morning he was heading out for a work meeting on the opposite side of town. What could he possibly be doing here? Curiosity burned in me, but it wasn't just curiosity, it was suspicion. My hands trembled as I parked a little further down the street, out of sight. My legs felt heavy as I approached the gate, moving quietly, each step making my heart pound harder. When I reached the door, it wasn't locked. It was slightly ajar, and from inside came the low murmur of voices. My mother's voice was distinct, weary yet calm. But the other voice, the deep, familiar tone of my husband, sent a wave of dread through my veins. I leaned closer, careful not to make a sound. What I heard next almost made me collapse. "You know I can't keep pretending much longer," my husband's voice said. "She thinks I'm faithful, that I'm hers completely. But you and I both know the truth." My stomach twisted violently, bile rising in my throat. Who was he talking about? My mother responded in a tone I had never heard from her before, sharp and almost pleading. "You promised me this wouldn't get out. If she finds out, it will destroy her. Do you really want to hurt her like that?" For a moment, my mind went blank, refusing to process the meaning of those words. Then it hit me with the force of a hurricane. My husband, my mother, they weren't just hiding something small. They were hiding the ultimate betrayal. I staggered back from the doorway, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps. My own mother, the woman who gave me life, who taught me trust, who was supposed to protect me, and the man I vowed to love and share a future with, conspiring in ways I didn't want to even imagine. I felt like the ground had split beneath me, and I was plummeting into an endless void. For several minutes, I just stood there outside, tears blurring my vision, listening to the fragments of their conversation. My mother begged him to be careful, to keep their secret hidden. My husband insisted he was torn, that his feelings couldn't be controlled. Every word was like a dagger cutting deeper into my chest. Finally, I couldn't hold it anymore. My hands pushed the door open with a force I didn't know I had. They both turned to me, their faces draining of color instantly. My mother's eyes widened in horror, and my husband stammered my name, but no sound came out of me at first. The silence in that room was louder than any scream. When I finally found my voice, it came out raw and trembling. "How could you? Both of you. You were the two people I trusted most in this world." My husband stepped forward, his hands raised, trying to explain. "It's not what you think," but I cut him off, my voice rising with a strength born of heartbreak. "Don't you dare. I heard enough to know exactly what it is. You lied to me. You betrayed me. And you, Mom," I turned to her, my vision swimming with tears. "You were supposed to protect me, not destroy me." My mother's lips quivered, and for the first time in my life, she couldn't meet my eyes. She whispered, "I never wanted you to know. I didn't want to hurt you." The irony struck me so deeply I almost laughed. Hurt me? She had ripped my heart out with her own hands. I walked out of that house with my knees shaking, my soul shattered, but one thing was clear, I could never look at them the same way again. The days that followed were the darkest I had ever known. My husband tried calling, begging me to listen, claiming it was a mistake, that he was confused, that it wasn't what I thought. My mother sent letters, messages, even neighbors to plead with me. But the trust had been annihilated. There was no glue strong enough to mend what they had broken. Yet in my darkness, I found something unexpected, strength. At first, I thought my life was over. But slowly, I realized this wasn't the end, it was the beginning of my true independence. I filed for divorce, packed my belongings, and moved out of the house we once shared. For my mother, I kept my distance. I still loved her as my mother, but I could no longer confide in her the way a daughter should. With time, I rebuilt myself. I focused on my work, on my passions, on rediscovering the woman I had been before betrayal clouded my skies. It wasn't easy. Nights were long, tears came often, and the wounds seemed endless. But one day, I woke up and realized I had survived the storm. I was no longer defined by what they did to me, I was defined by how I rose after they broke me. If there's one thing I've learned from that painful chapter, it's this: betrayal doesn't mark the end of your story. Sometimes, it's the harsh push life gives you to walk away from people who were never worthy of your trust, even if they wore the masks of husband or mother. True healing begins when you stop clinging to what shattered you and start embracing the strength you never knew you had. And so, I stand here today, not as a broken wife or a betrayed daughter, but as a woman who chose herself over lies, who rose from ashes and built a life that no betrayal can ever touch again.